There are many things I like about Munich, but the thing I like most is that they usually keep the agenda in flux until the very last minute, and then they come up with a special treat, and I think this panel is a special treat, because I think it's fair to say that we have two very distinguished gentlemen here who have rocked this world in their respective fields. Eugene Kaspersky, who really doesn't need an introduction here in this group, and Thomas Reed, who has not just written one of the most notable articles on the Russian hacking in the US election campaign in Esquire magazine, but has also released a new book with a German title, Maschinendämmerung, and I think in English it's Rise of the Machine, so it's a little more optimistic. I wonder what it's going to be like in Mandarin, because it's coming out in Mandarin as well.
I wouldn't understand.
Yeah, so there you will have to find out. But I've learned the lesson that it's all faster in the cyber age, so we have exactly 15 minutes for this panel, and the clock is ticking. So let me fire away with you, Eugene. If you look at the headlines of the past few days, just the past few days, we have the discussion in the US about hacking and intelligence services. We have Chancellor Merkel, as we speak, testifying in Parliament about the NSA scandal. So it's you've once spoken of the dark age of cyber, but I assume it's good for business, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately for you, yeah. So basically, it's good for your business model because there's more to do, right?
Yes, unfortunately, you're absolutely right that the rise of cybercrime and the very professional attacks, which are espionage or very professional attacks on the financial services, it generates a very huge load on the cybersecurity industry. Just a few numbers. Every day, we collect about 300,000 malicious objects from the internet, new malicious objects. 300,000 every day.
So that's 300,000 new clients every day.
Well, I didn't say the number of attacks, because every malicious piece can be used against thousands or 10,000, 100,000 victims.
Right.
So the numbers are huge. Unfortunately, the world is getting to be more and more the aggressive environment in the cyberspace.
So what is it like to work in this field as a Russian company these days?
It's much more easy than in any other country, because the most professional, May quote Condoleezza Rice. Once she said, there was a panel, and she turned to me and she said, by the way, Russian software engineers are the best. I agree. Russian software engineers are the best. And also Russian hackers and cyber criminals, they are worst. So we enjoy the benefits of having access to the best sources of best software engineers, and at the same time living in the same region. I didn't say Russia, Russian speaking.
Okay, so it's a new.
We live in the same region with the best hackers, because we are first. In many cases, we are first to see the new technologies, new vectors of the attacks. So we are first to recognize that something wrong is going on.
So we have a new definition of
and of course, it's like we have to pay double attention to be respected, recognized company, because I know that, of course, I don't need to explain that. Being a Russian company, we have to pay twice to be a trusted source of these other products and technologies.
So we have a new definition of the best and the brightest here. Thomas, you, as I mentioned, you wrote this article, which I think had the title how they pulled it off, or similar, how the Russians pulled off the biggest hack in U.S. electoral history. How did they pull it off?
Well, let me just, this works. Let me just quickly respond to something that Eugene said. And Eugene did not ask me to make this statement, but I want to make this statement.
The Russians are the best, or no?
Kind of, actually, because I think what happened in the past couple of months, and especially weeks in the United States, indeed makes it very difficult for a Russian cybersecurity company. Partly because the press coverage, especially in the past week or two, has been extremely counterproductive. You know, a degree of conspiracy theory in the United States is back in fashion. And especially in the past few days, with the friction between the intelligence community and the Trump administration getting really, really very strong, I feel very uncomfortable with the kind of press coverage that we see even in the New York Times and the Washington Post.
So you think it's exaggerated, or is it blaming the wrong people?
Let me just, on Kaspersky, on the company Kaspersky, I've been working with many of their threat intelligence people for many years, and I think Eugene is right, they have some of the very best people in the entire industry. They do incredible work, and I would just, you don't hear this often these days, but I would just caution people to not just talk about the Russians. We don't talk about the Americans wholesale. We don't talk about the Germans wholesale. This is a very large country with a lot of different interests and different companies. So let's be careful when we make these sweeping statements.
That is a very good point. But Eugene, you mentioned in some of your recent articles, I mean, there has been political propaganda, obviously, for a long time or so. With the IT age, it's a little different now. Because it's easier to politicize it, right? Because you don't really see, I mean, often people don't know who the perpetrators are, or for years it doesn't come out. So has that changed the entire equation?
Well, actually, this is not the news that political propaganda is not the IT technology, but they use IT just as a new tool to support the same ideas, to do the same things. So it's... I don't want to say that the reason of that is IT, but the IT is just a very powerful tool, the internet and all this, this. I will even use the definition of the information wars right now, because in the internet time it's so easy to have access to any kind of information, and it's very easy to release this information or disinformation.
And they probably cross borders very easily, disinformation, while there is hardly any cooperation between countries on that, or is there?
Oh yes, that's exactly the problem which I'm talking about for more than 10 years. Living in a cyber age, to fight with the cyber evil, there must be very strong cooperation between leading nations to sit together at the table and agree about some basic rules in a cyberspace, about the cyber security. Maybe one day we will see that. Okay, so well, actually what's going on, it's against the cybercrime, there is cooperation, but it's not enough. It's just the very first step. And I remember the very first conference, the London Cyberspace Conference in 2011. If you remember. So that was, I was really happy because they were the prime ministers, their presidents, there was a top level meeting, and they were speaking exactly the same things that I was speaking about for 10 years before that.
Finally.
Finally, yes. International cooperation against cybercrime, their private-public partnership, the information sharing. Now it's the usual terms now. But I was speaking about that for years before it happened.
But Thomas, you also take in your book a very long-term perspective on this whole thing, and and one of your points is that we have always had a kind of a mixed view on technology and machines. There were times when people were more euphoric, when they were more pessimistic. How does that? I mean, what state are we in right now?
Well, what stage are we in right now? So let me tease out a detail that is more sort of down to earth and very practical. When we talk about these high-profile breaches, and many people here in the audience will know that the German Parliament had a major breach. Has been hacked. Bundestag, just before the Democratic National Committee was hacked in the US.
Some assume by the same perpetrator.
Yeah, the evidence that links the two cases, the German Bundestag to the DNC breach, is very strong. That's a command and control infrastructure that was not widely known at the time, and it was hard-coded. The IP address was hard-coded into the implants. So I think when we talk about these high-profile cases perpetrated by political entities, by intelligence agencies, we have to understand they operate at very high volumes of targets. And they make mistakes. Also, criminal hackers make mistakes. And companies, as well as intelligence agencies and others, can find these mistakes and then analyze them in a great level of detail, with sometimes very high fidelity and also certainty about the evidence that we find. So often people don't appreciate how much we know about these operations if you start digging and looking very closely. So that's just a really important point that I wanted to highlight in the fight against cybercrime or against state actors. Today, disinformation is a very old word Eugene mentioned, is a very old practice. But today, we actually have more evidence than we had in the Cold War for disinformation campaigns and for espionage campaigns.
But do you think it's possible that, let's assume, for example, in the upcoming German electoral campaign, many people in Berlin tell you, well, we're going to see similar cyber attacks, you're going to see similar leaks, the way we have seen in the US or so, or we're going to see social bots being used by the parties. Can that affect the perspective people have on this technology, that they feel more frightened, that they...
These people, you mean victims of...
No, I mean, in general, the general public, yeah.
Yeah, so, I think Germany right now, as well as France right now, in the UK further down the line, in Europe, we have an opportunity to learn from some of the mistakes that the American political system America made. I think in Germany, it's probably a fair statement to say that we had more coverage by now about fake news than fake news. Right?
Well, that's our business.
That is a good thing, right? That's a good thing, because Germans are probably more alert and aware of the problem than Americans were, 9 months ago.
Right. What do you think?
So you are learning from the others' mistakes. That's very smart.
That's very smart. But I mean, if you look at this, for example, in the aftermath of the German campaign, of the electoral campaign in the US, I think everybody in Germany, that was at least my impression, has read this article about Cambridge Analytica, which Trump used. How is that? I mean, how is that affecting people's view on that, on technology that they use very carelessly normally?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know really, because actually, I don't know what the ordinary people, how do they accept this information. I think that's their level, their awareness about the cyber issues is quite high. But I think that's the main point is not to raise the level of information awareness in ordinary people, but the people who are make decisions. The politicians, their enterprises.
But do you have the impression, because many people haven't really changed their habits, they still are very careless?
No,
do you see?
It's not.
Well, it makes it easier for you, but do you?
I have numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know about this, how the recent news about elections and hacking, how did it change the behavior. I remember the time there was Snowden disclosures, and I had a speech, and there was the audience, like a few hundred people in the audience, and I asked the question, how many people changed the behavior because of the Snowden disclosure? 1, 2, 3%. The people behave in the same way. Come on, so it doesn't change the people's mind.
So how long would it take your...
All this news, they simply led people to help people to forget the previous news.
It's
How many of you?
Facts,
How many of you remember? How many of you remember Sony hack? It's gone.
Well, the people are gone at Sony too. That wrote these emails, but
do you know who was the main victim of the Snowden disclosures? No, Julian Assange.
How long would it take your company to hack into the headquarters of CD?
Oh, we never tried. We were never paid for that, but actually we have the team of penetration testers. They are very professional people, and if we have permission, if we have a request from American government to try these systems, and if we are paid, we will do that.
Can I?
Actually, this we made. I'm sorry, this is little ads. So we have this. We do the security audits and penetration tests on many enterprises, many industrial systems. We didn't see any 100% protected secure system. Zero.
Anywhere, yeah.
All of them vulnerable. It simply takes time and resources to find the breach.
Thomas wanted to
I'd like to bring a theme to the attention of the audience that I think is new and extremely important that I haven't heard discussed today yet. On election night, on November 9, American US election night, I was in San Francisco. I sort of planned a trip around the election. And of course, the city was in shock on the next day with Trump winning the election very unexpectedly. Felt really like Brexit to me. Then on the next day, I made the rounds in these large companies that shall remain unnamed, and the reaction that I heard several times was, "Oh my God, now we have to treat our own government like an InfoSec adversary. Now we have to not just design the adversary out of the system, the crypto system, the encryption system, for instance, but we have to design ourselves out of the crypto system, so that even if the government tries to coerce us into handing over data, we can't." So, and not to, that's more than end-to-end encryption. That's designing crypto systems that are essentially on autopilot once you switch the flip.
But is that your impression that there's going to be a confrontational approach in, let's say, Silicon Valley, or?
What I'm trying to say here is that this sounds drastic, but I think we live in drastic times. A lot of people, myself included, see liberal democracy under pressure and rolling back slowly. I think that's not an overstatement today. That has consequences for information security. That has consequences for privacy. We all want, even in a system that could be more adversarial than what we have today, that is what a lot of people in Silicon Valley think right now. How can we basically bake liberal values, liberal democracy into information systems, so that in the future, which could be even darker than what we have right now, our privacy and really our freedom is preserved by technology.
I'm sure we could go on for hours, but our time is already running out. So one last question to you, Eugene. When you look at Trump and the debates of the past few days, do you think the Russia connection is going to bring him down?
No idea. Well, I'm IT security guy. Don't ask me the political question. I'm watching, of course, what's going on. But don't ask me. I don't have the expert's opinion.
Well, you have a private opinion.
I can discuss that somewhere at home in my kitchen, but not here because.
Okay.
You may ask me about who are criminals. You may ask me about the cyber espionage, cyber terrorism, about all this stuff, who they are, what they're doing. I can point the fingers maybe for some areas. You'll find more information, but not about this. I'm curious. Of course, I'm curious man. I'm watching what's going on. Of course, I bought popcorn and switched my TV on, expecting the 3 major elections in Europe this year. I will enjoy that as many others.
I'm sure you will.
Especially if I'm Russian, so I'm watching from the distance.
One last word, because it's really so important. The way you phrase the question in a way about whether the Russia connection could bring down Trump is already, I think, quite problematic. What we've seen so far is bad enough. We don't need to get ready to see, some dark, secret Russian conspiracy to come out. That's not going to happen. What he's done so far, or not done, tax returns, etc., that's bad enough. I mean, we don't need to wait for even more.
As journalists, we always have to wait for more, but okay. I think that was a very interesting kickoff. We're going to reassemble in your kitchen to discuss more. But as of now, I would like to thank both of you for the brief introduction, and we're going to continue with our larger panel. Thanks so much, Eugene.